Greetings from Pittsburgh, PA. My name is Liz Sabol.
My name is Andy Cooperman, and I live in the Pacific Northwest in Seattle, Washington.
My name is Jordan Harrison, and I currently live in San Luis Obispo, California.
My name is Alex Mirieskin, and I live in Carrollton, Virginia.
My name is Cindy Miller, and I live in Athens, Alabama.
My name is Sarah Williamson, and I'm a goldsmith based in Nevada City, California.
My name is Matthieu Cheminee. I live in Montreal, Canada, but right now I'm in West Africa. We're doing a trip for Toolbox Initiative and Toolbox Travel.
My name is Valerie Jo Coulson. I live in Peckway, Pennsylvania.
I'm Henry Spencer. I live in New Hampshire.
I'm Autumn Lee. I live in Grand, Washington.
Hello, I'm Arturo and I live in Valencia, Spain.
My name is Sandra McEwen and I'm from Raleigh, North Carolina.
My name is Sophia Hu. I live in Las Vegas, Nevada.
I actually have here the first piece of jewelry that I ever made in a high school art class in 1972. On the inside I had inscribed, "To Kurt, 'tis not the beauty of the morn that proves the evening shall be clear." Kurt was my boyfriend at the time and is actually my husband and has been my partner for over 40 years.
The very first piece of jewelry I made was a set of wedding bands for a couple that came into my shop and said that they have a wedding in 1 hour.
I made a lost wax cast ring, and it was not very good, but it gives me a sense of where I came from.
The very first piece of jewelry I made was a pair of earrings I made for my dog when I was in kindergarten. I grew up in Beijing, China during 1970s and 80s. Because the isolation of society during that period, no one wore any type of jewelry. So up to now, I still don't know where I got my ideas from.
The very first ring that I made is this ring right here, which was a little sterling silver cast ring set with garnets. I call it now the booger ring, but back then I thought it was the best possible thing in the world.
The one thing I dislike the most is finishing.
The polishing.
Sanding and polishing.
These days I don't have a least favorite part. There isn't any part about doing what I do that I don't like. But I will say the only reason I can say that is because I haven't turned on a buffing machine since 1987.
I think my hands are steady, careful, and busy.
Creative, caring, and patient.
Sturdy, but nimble.
They have a jeweler's manicure. What is jeweler's manicure? That is where every nail is a different length, they're broken, and they're usually stained underneath.
So I'm standing outside of my office right now. You can see I actually have a studio in an old cotton textile mill, and this is where I work. So this is sort of the controlled mess that I make when I'm creating. My jewel tool, which is a workhorse, and my jewel bench that really needs to be cleaned up, but you know how that goes.
This is where the piece was actually built, and the most thing I love about it, that is a complete mess. But the good part, being a goldsmith, I learned over the years that if I am looking for any specific tool or a gem or anything, I know exactly where it's at. That's one of the reasons I do not clean it, because as soon as I clean this station, I will not find anything, ever.
This is pretty close to what my bench looks like all the time. I tend to clean up a lot. When I'm looking for a tool and I can't find it right away, I start putting tools away until I find it. It doesn't really get any better than this for me.
What I really love about my shop is having a big cutout into a bench. I think it's nicer to get inside the bench instead of being on the outside of the bench. So for me, this environment is very important. And then on the side here, I have my stamping station, so my anvil, collection of stamps, and a few tools to work with. Anvil from Africa, which I use for forging, and here the polishing, my favorite part of the jewelry process.
When I am working on my metal designs, I work in my studio. But for my fabrics, I need a more clean and dust-free space. So I invaded into our living room. I have occupied this dining table for over a year now. At the beginning, my husband complained a lot. But now I think he's already very used to eat in our kitchen over countertops.
This is the workbench in my studio. I have my soldering station, polishing, stone cutting equipment. Actually, here are some of the stones that I used to cut for the Firenze bracelet. I love every aspect of my studio. It's just a beautiful, beautiful space to work in.
This was a formative moment when I got this microscope. My detailed wire work completely exploded and went into crazy town because I can actually see what I'm doing with this microscope. It has a lovely light on it. It is wonderful. And I believe I bought it from Rio Grande, so you know you want one now.
You know, in old time, Navarro jeweler will have only a couple little old files that they will transform into stamps. So just one would be enough. I could do a design and retransform the end into a new stamp to keep on making a new design. So one stamp is really essential. And of course, to be able to stamp, I need a hammer. I have a ball peen hammer that I've been using for 27 years. And you can see how here, the dent is a little bit deeper. So it's each time I stroke, I guess it always comes to the same place. So really those two are essential to my work.
So the one tool I definitely could not live without is my Wacom tablet. It's an input device for my computer, and it has a pen that's pressure sensitive. And this way, the harder I draw, the thicker line I get, and the less I use pressure, the thinner line I get. Because I don't want it to be too perfect. I still want some of those inconsistencies and little imperfections on the edges of the art.
I think the tool that would break my heart if I lost is this old, scarred, little short-handled ball peen hammer that belonged to my grandpa Abe, who I never met. But I have his hammer. He was supposed to be a really great guy, but he took really poor care of his tools. So I use this tool for texturing. I use this tool every day. It means a lot to me.
In beginning of 2016, my team of goldsmiths set me up for a challenge. They say, Alex, we need you to have a project that will last you about a year. I said, okay, so we're gonna make, let's say, an Easter egg. And then I set up my personal challenge. I could not use any sketches. It started with very difficult fabrication of an egg, and then I started adding pieces to the complex. I had to learn how to make shingles. I had to learn how to make bricks and try to fit them all together. And I ran into a few different complications, but I finally got it all together. But at the end, I'm very happy with it, and it took a little bit of time.
I really wanted to create a piece of jewelry that was interactive, so I used gems and I made a metal ball that would roll inside of the bracelet. I think the hardest part was figuring out how I was going to solder it. I remember sitting over a bucket of water, figuring out how I was going to keep the rest of it together and cold while soldering together the top pieces.
I lived in Maryland a couple of years back, and my property looked right out onto a lake and some streams that came down. And I used to hike out there a lot of times just for inspiration, and there were just beavers everywhere. And as a matter of fact, they used to come into my yard and chew my trees down. But I was sort of fascinated with all of the little sticks, and they just pushing them in and making these structures that were really strong. So I started thinking about different ways to use this combination of sticks, and I liked the idea of how the sticks in different combinations would create different negative spaces. So the necklace itself creates these spaces where I'm able to drop little pearls down in those pockets. It looks very cohesive and solid around the entire neck, but when you start looking at it, it's really kind of a pile of sticks.
The winning piece is really a combination of ancestral technique like stamping, old technique that has been used all over the world, and new technique like 3D printing. So it's really a combination of the old techniques meeting new technology. I think the most challenging part was when the bracelet was formed and lightly anti-clasped, and I cut out a V shape in it. It was to draw the 3D part, all the little tubes, with the right angle to fit exactly in it without having to shape it with a hammer.
I created Rocket Askew because I've always had a dream of going up into space, so I decided to create a vessel that would allow me to do that.
I've been very interested in the last couple of years in narrative art. I've always loved Middle Ages, medieval style art, and I love art that really can convey a pretty deep story entirely through imagery. And so I wanted to tell kind of a story that was circular in motion and in several pieces, because cloisonné means compartments of color, and so I kind of wanted to expand my understanding of cloisonné into compartments of storytelling and visual compartments. So that's why the piece actually has 3 distinct pieces, and they're kind of like acts of the story. I really wanted to see how small I could go, how much detail I could cram in there. There's a lot of wire work. There's probably, I don't know, 10,000 pieces of wire in there. And then the second challenge was probably making the setting. I had 3 distinct pieces. They're kind of floating on a backing plate, and there was a lot of logistics as far as getting them just right so that they would kind of float evenly. I should just like make something small and simple, but instead I try to figure out on the way while we're doing it. So that was probably the biggest challenge, was getting the pieces to actually sit just right.
I got second place in 2 categories. One was gold jewelry. I did a 22 karat gold bracelet with a fine silver insert. It came from a piece, 7 pieces back, where I put a wavy line. It was a very secondary part of the design form, but it was a wavy line running down the middle. I liked it. I liked that, so I tried that a little further in another piece and another piece, and then finally I said, well, I want to make this into a gold bracelet. And the result is an extraordinarily simple design, but I consider it to be as well executed as I could possibly make it. Now, the other piece that I got second place for is in the silver objects or hollowware award, and I submitted a little silver box with a nuthatch on it. One of my favorite aspects about boxes is the bottom of the box really doesn't have to have any association with the side of the top. And one of the nice things about that is watching people's faces when they've made a judgment on what they see when they see the box on the table prior to picking it up. And then they turn it over, and it's a whole other piece. It's a whole separate item.
The very basic elements in my design are intersecting squares made out of polyester fiber. Through repetition and rotation of these very basic geometric forms, I hope to create an organic beauty with beautiful curved, twisted spiral lines. I want to show some movements in this material and bring it to life. I also want to encourage people to rethink the perceived value of some very common materials in their daily life. The most challenging part in making this design is how to make smooth and clean transitions from different types of fabrics I used here. In traditional Chinese wood structure, there's no glues or nails used. To honor this Asian craftsmanship, I challenged myself to come up with a design without using any type of glues or threads.
My winning piece is a ring that I call Poison Ring. It's a sterling and 18 karat gold and 14 karat gold fabricated ring that has a rattlesnake rattle that I painted red with a diamond at the tip, and I got it to shake. You know, it's funny, but the most challenging part of making the poison ring was actually finding rattlesnake rattles that were long enough, with enough buttons on them, and that were intact enough to actually be able to use in the ring. The next challenge was figuring out how to paint the rattles and still have them be able to make the sound.
The name of my piece is the Cheshire Cat. And the cat was a follow-up to the Saul Bell Award finalist piece that I made last year called The Mad Hatter. It was so exciting to be a finalist in the Saul Bell Award that I wanted to try again and maybe make something even more dramatic than the Hatter was. So the Cheshire Cat was the one that came to mind as the character I wanted to explore. The one thing I was thinking is, well, what kind of jewelry would the cat be? And I have a lot of cats. And cats are their own people. They don't do what you want them to do. They do what they want to do when they want to do it. So it dawned on me that you wouldn't wear the cat. The cat would wear you, so to speak, or ride on your shoulders when he felt like it. Now, the cat in Alice in Wonderland, he is invisible some of the time. And so that is where I came up with the idea that it wouldn't be a full neck wire. It would only go partially around, sort of like he's partially there, partially not. There are many, many challenges and many, many things went wrong. But I think one of the most time-consuming parts ended up being getting a good impression of the clay in the mold. And these molds were very large, and the longer the clay is in contact with that plexiglass, then the plexiglass wants to hang on to the clay. So I think I spent more time digging clay out of the mold than getting good impressions.
I wanted to make a classical concept ring with modern lines, different textures, and some carving and stone settings. The most challenging part of making the piece was saw cutting the interior and welding it to the ring.
My winning piece, Unfurl Rebel Jewel, I was very determined that I was going to enter Saul Bell this year. It came down to the wire. I had about 10 days to submit a finished piece of jewelry, and I received the custom cut stone by Dalen Hargrave around that time. So the entire piece was made without any kind of sketches. I used, various influences in my head and just kind of began to create shapes until this piece sort of unfolded on its own. And I really just tried to accentuate that main stone. Everything had to be handmade from scratch. The entire piece, I didn't stop moving. And I had to make every move with confidence, knowing I had no design, and this is not typically how I make a piece of jewelry. So it was a really, really great exercise for me, and I will probably try this again at some point, but maybe without the deadline at the end.
The Firenze bracelet epitomizes my nearly lifelong passion for the art of the Italian Renaissance. The upper portion of the bracelet, or upper half, mirrors a trompe-l'oeil design which I evidenced in the mosaic ceiling of the Baptistry di San Giovanni. I've inlaid this with Australian tiger iron, purple agate, and a patterned agate, rather a floral type agate. The lower part of the bracelet, inlaid with Australian tiger iron, is in deference to Brunelleschi, the builder of the dome of the adjacent Santa Maria del Fiore. The most challenging aspect of this work was to take the inspiration and engineer the construction. In doing so, I needed to translate a two-dimensional design into a three-dimensional object, which required a lot of intense formulation of the structure and the internal supports which would house the stones.
I make because I really have no other choice. I'm a maker and that's what I do.
I just love jewelry. It's my passion.
It gets me up in the morning. It keeps me excited about life.
It's a way to express my inner feelings, and it's a way to communicate with the outside world.
Every new idea becomes a new challenge.
For me, there is nothing more magical than taking something as simple and untouchable as an idea in my head, and with some hard work and perseverance, I actually can make it blossom into reality, something that's physical that someone can hold in their hands or wear.